Editing, proofreading, book covers, formatting, keywords, categories, pricing, ARC reviews, email lists, and the list goes on. If you're trying to self-publish your first novel, you've probably heard about all of these things, and maybe you've started to wonder, how in the world am I supposed to do all of this? Maybe you've watched 20 YouTube videos and you've opened 15 browser tabs on your computer, and instead of feeling more prepared, you feel more overwhelmed than when you started. And if that's you, I want to tell you, you do not need to figure out everything about self-publishing today. You don't need to master advertising, and you don't need thousands of social media followers. You don't need to understand every publishing platform, and you definitely don't need to become an expert in 20 different things before you're allowed to self-publish your first novel. You simply need to answer one question. What should I focus on next? So today, I would like to simplify self-publishing into 7 steps first-time fiction authors should focus on first. And with every step, I'm going to give you a few practical things that you can actually do instead of simply giving you more information to worry about. Because the goal isn't to become a publishing expert overnight. The goal is to move from, I have a story I want to tell, to, I have a finished book that readers can actually buy. So this is all one manageable step at a time. In case we haven't met, I'm Lorna Faith, and I show first-time fiction writers how to write sweet romance and other fiction, and how to self-publish their novels with simple and practical step-by-step videos. I hope the 7 steps that I share today makes self-publishing your novel feel a little less overwhelming. And if you would like a more detailed checklist on simple steps to self-publish your book, get your free download at the link below this video. So let's get started with step number 1. Finish your novel before you try to build your publishing empire. This sounds obvious, but it's surprisingly easy to get distracted from writing your novel by everything surrounding your novel. Maybe you're halfway through your first draft and suddenly you're researching. Should I publish exclusively on Amazon or should I publish wide? Do I need an ISBN? And what would my author logo look like? Should I start Instagram? What should I charge for my paperback book? Should I run Facebook ads? What keywords should I use? And pretty soon you've spent 3 hours researching self-publishing, but you haven't written a single word of your novel. And here's something I wish more beginning writers heard. Your unfinished novel doesn't need a marketing strategy yet. It needs an ending. There's nothing wrong with learning about publishing while you're writing, but don't let researching about self-publishing become another form of procrastination, because that's what I did, and I spent too much time on that and less time writing my novel, and I wish I would have turned that around and spent more time writing my novel. So if you're still writing your first draft, your most important job is to finish writing that story. You can't edit a book that you haven't finished, and you can't format a book that you haven't finished, and you can't self-publish a book that you haven't finished, and you certainly can't sell a book that you haven't finished. So instead of asking, how am I eventually going to self-publish this book? Instead, I encourage you to ask, what scene do I need to write next? And write that scene. Here are 4 practical steps to focus on right now. Number 1, write down your ending. You don't need every detail figured out. Write 1 paragraph describing where your protagonist needs to be when the story ends, and that gives you something to write toward. Number 2, break the remaining story into scenes. Don't tell yourself, I have 40,000 words to write, because that sounds huge and overwhelming. Instead, write down scene number 24, the heroine discovers the secret. Scene number 25, the hero confronts his brother. Scene number 26, the heroine decides to leave town, and etc. So now you're not trying to finish an entire novel, you're writing 1 scene at a time, and this helps to make it less overwhelming. Number 3, give yourself a small weekly writing goal. Maybe it's 500 words a day. Maybe it's one scene every 2 days. Maybe it's 3 writing sessions per week. Choose something that's realistic enough and small enough that you can actually keep doing it. I find this is very helpful for me. If I set the bar too high, I find it very discouraging when it happens over and over again that I don't reach it. So if I set my word count really low, then I usually don't have a problem reaching it. And in fact, it inspires me to keep writing because it feels like it's going so well. And so that's just a little tip to help you keep writing. And then number 4, create a not yet self-publishing list. So every time you start worrying about ISBNs or covers or ads or keywords, write it on your not yet list. You're not ignoring these things. You're simply telling yourself, I'll deal with that when I reach that stage. And what you can stop worrying about for right now would be ads, algorithms, launch teams, perfect author branding, advanced marketing strategies. Because right now, your first goal is simple. Just write to the end. Let's get back to our bigger list of what we should focus on right now. Step number 2, revise your story before you worry about self-publishing it. So when you are finished and you've typed the end, now it's tempting to immediately start thinking about book covers, formatting, publication dates. But before you make your novel look beautiful on the outside, make the story strong on the inside. Your first draft isn't really your finished book. Now it's time to revise. And here's one of the most important principles that I can give any first-time writer. Revise from big to small. So don't begin by spending 20 minutes rewriting one sentence in chapter 1. First ask, does the story itself work? Does my protagonist have a clear goal? Is there enough conflict? Do the stakes increase? Does the middle drag? Do my characters change? Does the climax resolve the central story problem? Does the ending deliver the emotional experience I promised my reader? And if you're writing a sweet romance, does the relationship gradually deepen? Does the hero and heroine have believable chemistry? Is there enough keeping them apart? And do both characters experience emotional growth? Does their happily ever after feel earned? So here's what I want to encourage you to focus on right now. When you revise your novel, think of it maybe like this. Pass number 1, the first time you read through your book, look at the plot. Look at what mainly happens in the plot, so the overarching picture. Write one sentence describing every chapter or major scene, and then ask yourself, does each scene move the story forward? If nothing changes because of a scene, consider strengthening, combining, or removing it. Then, on your read-through pass, number 2, look at the characters in your book. Follow your protagonist through the book and ask, what do they want? What are they afraid of? And how do those decisions change as the story progresses? And then look at the ending. Is this character emotionally different from who they were in chapter 1? And then do the same thing with if you did that with your heroine and you're writing a romance, then also do that with your hero, because these are good things to look at. Read through pass number 3, pacing. Mark the places where the story feels slow, especially in the middle of the story. Are characters repeatedly discussing the same problem? Could you combine 2 scenes? Can you introduce a complication? Can you force your protagonist to make a difficult decision? These are good questions to ask as you are looking at the pacing of your story. Read through pass number 4, your ending. Read through the final chapters together and ask yourself, did I resolve the major story question? Did I complete the protagonist's emotional arc? Did I resolve important subplots? Does the final scene leave the reader with the emotion that I want them to feel? And so those are things to look at when you are revising your novel. But for now, I encourage you to stop worrying about perfect commas, perfect formatting, Amazon categories, advertising. Focus on finish writing your story first, and then you can focus on self-publishing. Step number 3, get outside feedback for your story. At some point, you need another pair of eyes on your novel, because after reading your manuscript again and again, you can't see everything anymore. You know why your character behaves a certain way, and you know the villain's secret. You know what happened 10 years before the story began, but your reader only knows what you've actually put on the page. And that's why outside feedback can be very helpful. You might use beta readers, critique partners, trusted readers, or a professional editor or proofreader, depending on your budget and what your manuscript needs. And as you think about getting outside feedback for your novel, I just encourage you to do these few things. Number 1, find 2 to 5 trusted readers. Choose people who read in your genre. So, for example, if you've written a sweet romance, find readers who understand and love reading sweet romance. If you've written romantic suspense, find people familiar with romantic suspense. And number 2, give those beta readers specific questions. For example, ask them, where do you think the story feels slow? Was there anything in the story that felt confusing? Which character did you connect with most? Did any character's decision feel unbelievable? And was there a scene that you wanted to skim? And did the climax work? Did the ending satisfy you? And then number 3, look for patterns in the feedback that beta readers give you. If one reader doesn't like a character, that might simply be a personal preference. If 4 readers say, I don't understand why she made that decision, then you probably need to look at that scene and maybe do some revisions. Number 4, create a feedback revision list. Instead of immediately changing the manuscript, write down the major issues. For example, clarify Sarah's motivation in chapter 8. Strengthen the conflict in the story in chapters 12 to 15. Foreshadow the reveal earlier. Add more emotional reaction after the midpoint. So those are just examples that you might write in your notebook, or you might write. I write in Scrivener, and so when I write notes, I write it in the side column, the right-hand side column in Scrivener. And so if I'm writing chapter 8 and I think, oh man, I should have mentioned this in chapter 3, then I will just make a little side note that says, remember to look back at chapter 3 and revise this part. So these are just helpful tips as you're writing, and that way you don't stop the flow of your writing, which is very important. So really what we're trying to do is to create a satisfying experience for your ideal reader. And the rest of it we can stop, worrying about. Just focus on writing a really good story, and you can get to the next part later. Step number 4, edit and proofread in the right order. So now, as you're getting closer to self-publishing your book, this is where writers hear all kinds of editing terms like developmental editing, line editing, copy editing, proofreading, and you might be thinking, do I need 4 different editors? I would say not necessarily, because developmental editing deals with the big picture story. You might not be needing that, especially if you've written 2 or 3 books. Probably all you would be needing is either line editing, which focuses on more closely on the writing itself, or copy editing, which fixes the grammar, punctuation, and consistency. Or you could go with a proofreader, which is one of the final checks for any remaining errors that you might find in your manuscript. And so your book might require different levels of help, but I usually just choose one, and it's usually copy editing or proofreading for mine, because I have other people that go through. I have many eyes on the manuscript because I have beta readers, and I have my adult children who read it, and then I also read it, of course. And so often I'll have a proofreader to do the final pass, and that really helps. So the big thing to remember is when you are revising, focus on the big problems first, and then get to the small problems last. And really, right now, you can stop worrying about creating a flawless manuscript with zero possibility of an error. The goal isn't impossible perfection, but really the goal is that you've created a book as well as you can and as free of errors as you can. Step number 5, create a book package that your readers will recognize. So now we get to the visual part where your readers will see your book. So this is your book cover, your title, your interior formatting. And here's one of the biggest mistakes that I find first-time authors make, and which I did myself. But, when we're just starting out, we can tend to choose a book cover that's based entirely on, I think this cover looks beautiful. And you do want your book cover to look beautiful. But it's not just about the artwork. It's also what you're communicating to your reader. And so this is the kind of book cover that you really want to look for, is something that really reflects your genre, right? And so here's what you could focus on when you are choosing your book packaging. Number 1, find 20 books that are similar to yours in your genre that you're writing. If you're writing sweet romance, you'd find 20 sweet romance book covers. Look at books in your specific genre and subgenre. Not just books that you personally like, but books that your ideal reader is currently buying. And then number 2, study patterns. What fonts are being used on these book covers? What colors? And are there people on the book cover? Are there illustrations? Are there landscapes, objects? How large is the title on the page? And how prominent is the author name on the book cover? What emotional feeling do the covers create? And then write down in a notebook, just write down the patterns that you notice, and you'll find that this is actually quite helpful. It was for me, so I think that'll really help you. And number 3, write down a simple cover description before you begin to work with a book designer, or if you're designing your own cover. Write down some of these things: the genre that you're writing in, the subgenre, the tone that you're looking for, the setting, the imagery, and comparable books, comparable authors that also write in your genre, and the emotional feeling that you want the book cover to communicate. Number 4, test your book cover at thumbnail size. And this matters because many readers still first see your book as a tiny image on the screen. Ask yourself, can you still read the title? Can you still recognize the book genre? And does it still catch your eye? And then number 5, check your interior formatting. Look at chapter headings, margins, paragraph indentation, scene breaks, page numbers, headers, fonts. You really do want the formatting of your book to disappear so that readers can concentrate on reading your story. And so your goal really is that your reader will recognize that this is a book they would love to read. And that's really our goal. Step number 6, create your 1-page self-publishing plan. Now is the time to write down keywords, categories, book descriptions, pricing, publishing platforms. And instead of keeping all of this information in your head, I encourage you to write it down in one place. Here you could focus on writing down your final book title. Double check that the title and subtitle are exactly how you want to see them on the cover. And then write down your author name. Decide whether you are self-publishing under your real name or a pen name. And then write down your book description. Write your sales description before upload day. And focus on character, conflict, stakes, and emotion and curiosity. Instead of summarizing the novel, you're just wanting to create that curiosity so that readers really want to discover what happens in your book. So this will really help so that when it's time to upload your book, that you're not searching through 17 folders and wondering which file is the final file where I had all my information. You can just look at one place, and that will really be helpful. Finally, let's get to step number 7. Create a simple first reader plan. And finally, we get to marketing your book. And this is where many first time self publishing authors feel completely overwhelmed. I know I did, because there was so much I needed to learn. And I did often feel overwhelmed because of that. Part of the marketing is, do you want to be on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok? I wouldn't worry about being on all of them, because that can get overwhelming. Maybe choose one. And then also email newsletters. That would be, I think, the most important. If you could do anything, focus on email newsletters, because that's really where you will attract readers. Offer your readers that are in your genre, offer them a free short story or even a scene or two. And then you could use that as a reader magnet, that they would really be interested in being on your email list. It's important to simplify. So your first marketing goal doesn't need to be sell 10,000 books. Instead, find your first readers. That's a great marketing goal. So ideas on what you could focus on right now would be: describe your ideal reader in one paragraph. What kind of fiction books do they already enjoy? What tropes? What emotional experiences do they enjoy? And what other authors do they read? Knowing who you are trying to reach with the novels that you write makes marketing your book a lot simpler. Number 2, choose one main way to connect with readers. And maybe that's your email list. That's the one that I would encourage. That is going to be the one that has the potential to reach more readers. And I use BookFunnel to offer my free book to readers on my email list. And that's for a few years now. That has really worked well. So I encourage you to do the same. Choose somewhere where you can realistically show up consistently. And then number 3, create 10 pieces of content around your book. These are some ideas. Why you wrote your story, talk about the setting, talk about your characters, talk about your research, talk about your favorite tropes, behind the scenes details of your writing and what inspired you to become a writer, a character quote, a question for your readers, a glimpse into your writing process. When you're doing this, you are giving readers reasons to become curious about your story. And then step number 4, give readers somewhere to stay connected. An email list is a really reliable way of maintaining connection with readers who really do enjoy your books. Your goal isn't really to reach everybody, it's to find your readers. And so just to recap, here's your simple 7-step roadmap. You don't have to do everything. You simply need to know where you are. So if you're still writing your book, step 1 would be finish your novel. If you've typed the end, step 2 is revise your story. Once you've revised your story, step 3 is get outside feedback. When the story is working, then you move to step 4 and you edit and proofread. And then when the manuscript is ready, you move to step 5 and prepare your book cover and your formatting. And then when your book files are ready, you move to step 6 and create your self-publishing plan. And when you are approaching self-publishing, step 7 is begin to find your first readers. The important thing is to remember that you don't have to do step 7 when you're still on step number 1. And that's one of the biggest reasons that self-publishing can become overwhelming. And that was really my experience. It became overwhelming when I first started because I was thinking of all the steps instead of focusing just on one at a time. And so I just want to encourage you to focus on one step at a time. So whatever stage you're at, I encourage you to identify your next step. Then give yourself a deadline for completing it. And when you've completed that step, then it's time to choose what the next step is. Remember that you started this whole journey because you had a story to tell. And somewhere along the way, you thought about the algorithm and the metadata and the social media and the formatting And maybe as you thought about all those things that you still need to do, somewhere in the process you felt a little overwhelmed. But underneath all of this self-publishing technology is really something that is quite beautiful. You wrote a story, and somewhere out there is a reader who really wants to read exactly the kind of story that you love to tell. And so your job isn't to master the entire self-publishing industry before you're allowed to reach your reader. Your job is to simply keep moving to the next step. One scene, one chapter, one revision, one decision, one self-publishing step at a time. And eventually your manuscript that's sitting on your computer becomes something very different. It becomes a book with your name on the cover, and a real reader can hold it in their hands. So whenever self-publishing starts to feel overwhelming, instead of asking, how am I going to do all of this? I want to encourage you to ask, what's the one next step I need to take? And then take that action. And if you're almost ready to self-publish your manuscript and you want to learn the next steps between typing the end and getting your novel ready to self-publish, then watch this video next. I'll see you there.